Welcome to tutorial 2. First up, I'm just going to pierce the fourth wall here. The first part of this tutorial is all about using Docker and setting up a SQL server inside a Docker image and preloading that with data in our schema. So I've been doing this entire tutorial inside a Windows 10 VM running on Hyper-V inside Windows 10. The reason for this is I can keep the development environment nice and clean, and that it ensures that I don't assume that I've got anything installed that you might not have installed at home or that I haven't talked to you about. That's fine, but when it came to running Docker inside that VM, it turns out that nesting is not enabled by default, and if you don't know it's called nesting, it's pretty tough to search for Win10 VM inside Win10 VM or any other variation of that. So first trick is we need to enable virtualization and pass-through instructions for our VM. So I'll just go ahead and do that. And this is breaking out of where I normally record this series. And once we've done that, we can actually head inside our machine. Now, if you're running this directly on a physical Windows 10 or other computer, or other OS, then you won't have to do that step there. Right, now we're back inside, inception time over, and let's move on. Well, we've gone back in the past a little bit, but anyway, here we are. We've got our clean machine. We're going to download Docker for Windows. We're going to download the Edge build, but you could download the stable build. This should work fine. Now, once you've downloaded that, we're just going to install it. You need Windows 10 Enterprise or Professional to run Docker. There'll be a link at the end for this page, and it has more details about exactly which build you need. But if you've got a fairly recent build of Windows 10, you should be absolutely fine. Now we're going to launch Docker. It's going to start, and it's going to say that actually it's going to need some Hyper-V extensions installed on Windows to work correctly. So we're going to let it reboot and install those extensions for us. We don't have to do anything else. And we log back in and we should be up and running. Now we're going to go into our code folder and into our project folder. We're going to create a Docker directory for our Docker files. This will be the first. We may pick up some more later on. And we're going to call it CodePersuit-DB and head into there. Then we're going to open this folder with Visual Studio Code, and we're going to create our Docker file in there. So open the folder, and the first file we're going to create is the Docker file. It has no extension on it, and we are going to start with the Docker image for SQL Server for Linux. So I played around with the SQL Server for Windows containers. They're a lot bigger and they took quite a while to load up, and I thought it would be interesting to run it on Linux anyway. You can either run Linux containers or Windows containers through Docker at any one time, and if we run SQL Server for Linux, that means that we can run other Linux containers to play around with our app working cross-platform. So we are just going to make a directory on our Docker image as part of our build script and set the working directory to that folder. Then we're going to copy what's in the local directory up onto our Docker image, and we're going to expose port 1433, which is the default SQL Server port. Then for our final command, we're going to run our entry point script. We're going to set the line endings on all these files to LF, not CRLF, because primarily they're going to run in Linux environments, and you'll definitely have problems if your scripts have CRLF when they run inside the Docker image at least. So now we're going to make our entry point script, and at the moment we're just going to set that to start the SQL Server, which is in options MS SQL Server bin SQL Server.sh, and there's no E at the end of server. So once again, we'll change the line endings on that, stop it. Now we're going to go to our settings and increase the amount of memory available to Docker, because SQL Server says it needs at least 3.5 gigs. We may use some other Docker images later, so I'm just going to give it 6 gigs for now. We'll hit apply, we'll wait for Docker to restart. And now we'll head out to our command prompt And we should be able to just go Docker build and build the local folder, but it'll pick up the only Docker file in there. And we'll give it a name, which is CodePersuit-DB. This is going to pull down all the images and the modifications to those images that we need from the internet and verify and extract them. As I said, you can see this is quite a small image considering that this is a full SQL server. I'm not entirely sure if I'd run SQL Server inside a container in production, but definitely for test and dev, this is an ideal scenario. And once you've got this down, then actually running and starting new SQL Server images is pretty small. It gives you a nice isolated version of SQL Server. It won't be interfered with anything else. We're running the latest image. Now, if you're actually trying to match production or something like that, then you probably want to lock it to a specific version. But for now, we're happy with latest. So that's done. And our build has completed. And so now we'll just run that container quickly. Now we need to set some environment variables. The first one is to accept the license agreement automatically, otherwise it'll hang waiting for us to accept it. The other environment variable is the SA password. Now obviously for development purposes and for testing, we're going to set this SA password directly in our scripts. This is not what you'd want to do in production at all. You'd want these to be passed down by some kind of key, secret vault or whatever in your environment and pushed into environment variables that way. We're going to expose port 1433 as 1433, and we're going to use the bridge network so that we can access this SQL Server from other machines on our network if we need to. And finally, we give it the image name, which is Docker Pursuit-DB. So we're going to run that, and we've made a wee mistake. There is no shortcut -n for network. It has to be --network. And we'll hit enter, and away it goes. Now we're just going to attach to that and just see what it's actually doing. We should be able to see SQL Server booting up. Now one trick here is that you don't actually have to specify the entire Docker hash. You can just specify the first few digits. It makes life a lot easier. We can see that's running, so we're just going to go to SQL Server Management Studio and connect to that image, or connect to that SQL Server instance, and check it out. And there we go, we've got a full SQL Server running inside Docker on Linux, inside a VM. Thank you for watching, and in the next part, we'll actually start scripting up our database.